The 22nd of May, 1718, Charleston, South Carolina. You're standing on the wharf at the mouth of the Cooper River, and the morning air tastes like tar, dead fish, and human waste. The tide's coming in, and with it, a smell you'll never forget. Careened ship hulls scraped clean of barnacles and sun-rotted seaweed, mixed with the stink of a slave ship that docked 3 days ago and still hasn't finished unloading its cargo. This is the richest port in British North America. Rice, indigo, deerskins, human flesh, all of it moves through these wharves. 3,500 souls live here, and out past the harbour bar, blocking every ship from leaving or entering, sits a fleet of 4 pirate vessels. The flagship is a captured French slaver called Queen Anne's Revenge. 40 guns. 300 crew, give or take, depending on how many died of dysentery overnight. Beside her, 3 sloops. And on her quarterdeck stands a man the world will spend 300 years lying about. His name is Edward Thatch. You probably know him as Blackbeard. Forget everything Disney sold you. Forget the rum-drunk rogue with a heart of gold. Forget Jack Sparrow. Forget the parrots. Forget the buried treasure maps with X marking the spot. None of that exists. None of it ever existed. What's actually sitting in your harbour is a 6-foot-something walking biological weapon with rotting teeth. Slow match fuses braided into his beard so he looks like he's smoking when he boards a ship, and a crew of men whose noses are literally falling off their faces from late-stage syphilis. He's taken hostages. A member of the Governor's Council named Samuel Ragg. Ragg's 4-year-old son, William. 8 or 9 other ships, their crews, their cargo. Charleston's economy has stopped breathing. And here's the part the storybooks won't tell you. Here's the detail that should make you understand exactly what kind of operation this is. Blackbeard does not want gold. He doesn't want silver. He doesn't want pieces of 8. He doesn't want jewels or silks or sugar or rum. He wants a medicine chest. 1 small wooden box. Mercury, laudanum, lead salts. The crude, poisonous, half-functional medicines of 1,718. The only thing standing between his crew and the diseases, eating them alive from the inside out. Mercury to slow the syphilis that's rotting half his men into shambling corpses. Opium for the men screaming in the dark from infected wounds. Antiseptics for the gangrene that turns a sword cut into a death sentence inside a week. 300 to 400 pounds sterling worth of medicine. That's the ransom. That's what the most feared pirate in the Atlantic is willing to murder a child for. Because in the real world, pirates don't bury treasure. They die of venereal disease in their 20s. Romance is for the people who never had to smell them. Now stop and look around. There's no Royal Navy in your harbour. The Lords Proprietors who chartered this colony have abandoned it to the wolves. Your governor, Robert Johnson, is sitting in his council chamber realising the same thing every Charleston merchant has been pretending wasn't true for 20 years, that the city has been getting fat on stolen pirate goods, and now the men they've been buying from are at the door, asking for the bill. This isn't a swashbuckling adventure. This is organised crime. This is a protection racket run by syphilitic killers. And you, friend, are about to watch an entire American city get held hostage by a man who just wants enough drugs to keep his men breathing for 1 more month. Welcome to Charleston, 1718. This is how the wolves came to collect. But before we get to the wolves, you need to understand who's been feeding them. Step back from the harbour. Walk inland 3 blocks. You're now on Bay Street, the spine of Charleston, and your boots are sinking into something. Don't look down. It's a mix of horse manure, oyster shells, fish guts, the contents of last night's chamber pots, and the runoff from the slaughterhouse 2 streets over. The city has no sewers. It won't for another century. When it rains, the streets become open drains. When it doesn't rain, the smell hangs in the heat like a wet towel pressed over your face. You pass a tavern, the Pink House, the Carolina Coffee House. Doesn't matter which, they're all the same inside. The rum is cut with gunpowder to make weak men think it's strong. The beer is brewed with brackish water that gives you the runs by midnight. The women working upstairs charge by the act, and most of them have something growing on them that no surgeon in 1718 can cure. A sailor walks in with 3 months of wages. 48 hours later he stumbles out, broke, drunk, and infected, and signs onto the next ship out because he can't afford the room anymore. This is your Charleston, the richest port in British North America, the Venice of the South. Now here's the part the tourist brochures will never tell you. Every silver candlestick in every fine merchant's home in this city, there's a 50-50 chance it was stolen. Every bolt of silk in the warehouses on East Bay, every cask of Madeira on the governor's table, the deerskins, the sugar, the indigo dyes, half of it moved through pirate hands before it touched a Charleston dock. For 20 years, the merchants of this city have been running a fence operation. They call it trade. The English crown calls it trafficking with sea robbers. A man named Richard Tuckerman makes a small fortune buying goods off pirate sloops and selling them to the same London buyers who'd hang the pirates if they ever met them in person. He gets indicted. He keeps trading. The Governor's Council is full of men who do the same. Court records from this period read like a mafia ledger: names, dates, cargo, all of it laundered into respectability. Charleston didn't get rich because of God's blessing. Charleston got rich because it was the best money laundering port on the Atlantic seaboard, and the men running it knew exactly what they were doing. Out in the Bahamas, 80 miles east of Florida, sits the engine that makes all of this run. Nassau, the Republic of Pirates, a waterlogged shantytown of beached hulls, palmetto-thatched huts, and rotting fish that by 1716 is home to over 1,000 active sea robbers. Henry Jennings, Benjamin Hornigold, Blackbeard's old captain, the man who taught him the trade. Charles Vane, who'll later be the last man standing and die kicking on a Charleston gallows. Stede Bonnet, the sugar planter who abandoned his wife and 3 children to play pirate because his marriage was unhappy. That's the actual documented reason. He left a wife to go murder strangers because she nagged him. Romance. And here's where we strangle the next myth in its crib. You've been told pirates were Democrats, egalitarian rebels. The internet loves this one. Articles signed by every man, equal shares of plunder, votes on the captain. All of that existed. None of it meant what you think it meant. A pirate ship was a criminal syndicate with a written charter. Same playbook as the 5 families. Same playbook as the Yakuza. Yes, the men signed articles. Those articles also included punishments like flogging until your back showed bone, marooning being dropped on a sandbar with a pistol, 1 shot, and the strong suggestion to use it on yourself before the thirst did, and the punishment they called the sweat, where the crew would form a ring around an offender below decks, light candles, and stab him with sail needles every time he passed within reach. He'd run in circles until he collapsed. Then they'd throw seawater on him and start again. That's your democratic utopia. A floating saw trap with a constitution. The men running these ships weren't Robin Hoods. They were career criminals with a 2-year life expectancy. The math is brutal. The average pirate signed on at 22 and was dead by 25. If a Royal Navy round shot didn't take his head off, dysentery would empty him out in a week. Yellow fever would cook him alive in the Caribbean heat. Scurvy would loosen his teeth until they fell into his rum. And syphilis, the slow killer, the one that ate Blackbeard's crew from the groin to the brain, would chew its way through his skull over a decade until he died blind, mad, and screaming in some alleyway that smelled exactly like the one you just walked past. Almost none of these men ever spent the gold they stole. They drank it, gambled it, or paid it to the women in Nassau who gave them the diseases that killed them. The treasure chest is a lie. The pirate economy ran on debt and rot. So how did it get this bad? Blame the Empire. In 1713, the War of Spanish Succession ends. Britain, France, and Spain signed the Treaty of Utrecht. 40,000 privateers, government-licensed pirates who'd spent a decade getting paid by London to rob Spanish ships, are suddenly unemployed. They have one skill. They have ships. They have crews. And the crown that built them now wants them to politely retire to a fishing village somewhere and shut up. They don't. They sail to Nassau. They keep doing exactly what they were trained to do. Except now the targets are British. Britain built the monster. Britain refused to feed it. The monster ate the Caribbean. By the spring of 1718, every merchant in Charleston has been buying from this monster for over a decade. They've grown fat on it. They've built brick mansions on East Bay with the proceeds. They've sat at fine tables and complained about the manners of the lower classes while their wine glasses were paid for by piracy. And now the bill is coming due because Edward Thatch is no longer interested in selling. He's interested in collecting. And he is bringing 400 men, 60 guns, and a list of demands written in blood straight to the front door of the city that made him rich. Stop the ship for a second. You just learned that for 20 years, the most respectable merchants in Charleston were laundering pirate gold and pretending to be civilized men. The same families, the same names, the same brick mansions you can still tour today on a $50 walking tour. So here's the question. Drop it in the comments. We read every one. If your great-great-grandfather got rich fencing stolen goods for syphilitic killers, and that money built the church he got married in, the school his sons went to, the city your family still calls home, does that money still have blood on it 300 years later? Or does the stink wash out after enough generations? Tell us in the comments. And if you want more real history, the kind they will never put on a Harbour Tour brochure, hit the like button. Feed the algorithm with truth instead of treasure maps. The more of you who do, the more wolves we can drag out of the dark. Now, back to Charleston, because the wolves are at the door. And they are not in a forgiving mood. The morning of May 22nd starts like any other. The sun comes up over Sullivan's Island. The harbour pilots row out to meet the inbound traffic. The merchants on East Bay crack open their ledgers and pour their first cup of coffee. By breakfast, Charleston knows it is dead. The pilot boats come back in screaming. There's a fleet outside the bar, a 40-gun ship, 3 sloops, no flags they recognize at first. Then the flags go up. Black, red, the death's head. The hourglass, the skeleton with the spear pointed at a bleeding heart. Edward Thatch has arrived. The first ship he takes is the Crowley, Captain Robert Clark commanding, bound for London with a hold full of rice and a passenger list full of regret. She's the wrong ship at the wrong moment. Aboard her is Samuel Wragg, member of the Provincial Council of South Carolina, basically a state senator, and his 4-year-old son William. Wragg is on his way to England on personal business. He will not arrive on schedule. Within 72 hours, Blackbeard has 8 more vessels, maybe 9. The records get shaky, because nobody in Charleston has the bandwidth to keep proper logs anymore. 2 ships outbound for London. A pink loaded with naval stores. A sloop from Boston. Brigantines snows every hull that tries to clear the bar. He doesn't even have to chase most of them. They sail into him, because they have no idea he's there. And here's the thing. He doesn't burn them. He doesn't sink them. He parks them. He lines them up like a used car lot off the harbour entrance, with the crews and passengers locked in their own holds, and he waits. Because Edward Thatch is not here to fight. He is here to extort. Charleston stops breathing. No ship comes in, no ship goes out. No fish come to market, because the fishermen are too scared to launch a dinghy. The price of bread doubles in 3 days. The price of salt triples. The militia mobilizes 1,000 men, maybe, and gathers on the wharves looking impressive and accomplishing exactly nothing. There is no Royal Navy ship in port. There hasn't been one in months. The colony has been begging London for a single warship for 2 years. London has not answered the letters. Now picture yourself below decks on the Crowley. You're Samuel Wragg. You are an educated man, a wealthy man, a man who wears clean linen, dines off porcelain, and has never in his life sat in his own filth. You are crammed shoulder to shoulder with the rest of the hostages in a hold that smells like a slaughterhouse in August. The bilge water is 6 inches deep with vomit, urine, and seawater. The man next to you has yellow fever and is voiding himself in his sleep. The man across from you has tertiary syphilis, and his face is a wet ruin where a nose used to be. Pirates come down the ladder every few hours to count you, to threaten you, to laugh in your face about what they're going to do with your son if the governor doesn't pay. Your son is 4. He hasn't stopped crying in 2 days. You're holding his hand. You're trying to keep him from looking at the man with no nose. This is the part the movies skip. On the 3rd day, Blackbeard sends his terms ashore. The messenger is a man named Richards, lieutenant, one of Thatch's most trusted thugs.
Right then, let's see what we have
he
here.
takes the captain's gig, rows into Charleston with 2 pirates
2, 3,
and a hostage
4,
as proof
5.
of life. A man named
strike the
Marks,
harbour at dawn.
who is supposed to verify the
men
demands
and the
and then
charts.
return.
Hey, Captain.
Richard swaggers
shall
up
be
the
done.
wharf in broad daylight, in the middle of the largest city in the southern colonies, while the militia stands there with muskets in their hands and does nothing. Because if anyone touches him, the hostages die. He knows it. They know it. He walks into the governor's chambers like he owns the place. For all practical purposes, he does. He hands over the ransom note. Now you'd expect, given everything you've ever been told about pirates,
Governor, gentlemen,
that the note
terms are
demands
explicit.
gold,
We demand
pieces of
£500
8,
in exchange for the
the
hostages
colony's
and cargo.
treasury,
This is outrageous.
the governor's
We must
strongbox.
refuse.
It does not. It demands a chest of medicine, worth between £300 and £400 sterling, mercury, laudanum, lead salts and tincture of opium, antiseptic spirits, and surgical tools. The entire pharmaceutical kit a ship's surgeon would need to keep 400 diseased men breathing for another 6 months at sea. If the chest is not delivered, every hostage dies, every ship burns, and Samuel Ragg's 4-year-old son's head goes back to the governor in a sack. And here is why. Blackbeard's crew is dying, not from battle, from themselves. Mercury is the only known treatment for syphilis in 1718, and it doesn't cure it, it just slows it down by poisoning the patient with heavy metals at a rate slower than the disease itself. There's a saying among ship surgeons of this era: one night with Venus, a lifetime with Mercury. Half of Thatch's men have it. A quarter of them are in advanced stages. They need the salivation cure, where you ingest mercury until your gums bleed and your saliva pours out by the cupful, and you hope the disease dies before you do. He needs opium for the men screaming in the dark with infected wounds. He needs antiseptics for the gangrene that's eating into bone. He needs everything in that chest, and he needs it now, because without it his crew will mutiny and kill him before any Royal Navy ever gets the chance. This is what the most feared man in the Atlantic has been reduced to: a drug dealer's resupply run, except he's the one who needs the drugs. The Governor's Council convenes an emergency session. They debate, they argue, they squirm, they know they have to pay. They dispatch men to gather the medicine. It will take a few days. The price is acceptable. The humiliation is not. And then Richards disappears. Because while the city is panicking, while the council is scrambling for mercury, the pirate emissary and his 3 thugs are getting blackout drunk in a Charleston tavern. They are harassing the women upstairs. They are picking fights with the regulars. They are eating on credit and slapping down stolen Spanish coins for cut rum. There is a documented account of Richards walking through the streets of Charleston, armed and openly drunk, while the governor's militia watched and did absolutely nothing. Imagine the cleanup bill on that one. Out at the bar, Blackbeard waits. 1 day, 2 days, the medicine doesn't come. Richards doesn't come back. He starts to suspect a trick. He sends word that if the chest is not delivered immediately, he will execute every hostage and send their heads to the governor as a final invoice. He is not bluffing. He has done it before. The council finally finds Richards face down in a back room and pours water on him until he can stand. They sober him up. They load the medicine chest into a boat. They send it out to the Queen Anne's Revenge. Blackbeard takes the chest. He inspects it. He confirms the contents. And then, in one final piece of theatre, he strips every hostage down to their underclothes, takes every personal valuable they have, about £6,000 sterling in cash, watches, rings, silver buckles, and goods on top of the medicine and dumps them on a sandbar 2 miles from the city. Samuel Ragg and his 4-year-old son walk back into Charleston barefoot, in their shirts, in front of every merchant who's ever shaken Ragg's hand at a dinner party, and then the wolves sail away. The council exhales. The merchants exhale. The governor exhales. They tell each other it's over. They tell each other Charleston survived. They start drafting the official letters to London about the heroic defence of the city, carefully leaving out the part about Richard's drunk in the tavern and the council member's son walking home in his nightshirt. They have no idea Blackbeard has already turned his fleet north. They have no idea what he's about to do next. They have no idea that the most violent act of his entire criminal career is not going to be aimed at the British Crown, at a merchant ship, or at the city of Charleston. It is going to be aimed at his own men. And when the smoke clears, 25 of the men who sailed with him into Charleston harbour will be marooned on a sandbar, screaming his name into the wind, wondering how the captain they bled for sold them out for a bigger cut. So let's go to that sandbar. It's a few weeks after Charleston, Topsail Inlet, North Carolina, a nothing patch of water between the mainland and a chain of barrier islands. The kind of place where the channel is shallow and shifty, and a careless captain can run a deep draft ship onto a sandbar and tear her bottom out before he's had his morning rum. Edward Thatch has been sailing these waters for years. He is not a careless captain. He is the most experienced ship handler in his crew. He could navigate Topsail Inlet with his eyes shut. He runs the Queen Anne's Revenge straight onto the sand at flank speed. She rips her keel open. She is not coming off. Her quartermasters and the whole crew watch her settle into the bottom while the tide comes in. Then Thatch sends his second largest sloop, the Adventure, in to help pull her off. The Adventure runs aground too, in exactly the same way, in exactly the same place. 2 ships, both wrecked, both in the same hour, both in water Blackbeard had been navigating his entire criminal career. It was a setup. Here's what happens next. Thatch takes the cargo, all the cargo, the loot from Charleston, the loot from a dozen other ships, and loads it onto the smallest sloop, the Revenge. He picks his 40 favourite men, 40 out of more than 300, the cleanest, the most loyal, the least diseased. Then he rows about 25 of the rest over to a sandy little hump of an island a few miles offshore, and he leaves them there. No water, no food, no boat, no way home. He waves goodbye and sails for North Carolina. This is the man your Disney movies told you was loyal to his crew. The marooned men live for 2 days on rainwater and shellfish before another pirate sloop, captained by the gentleman pirate Stede Bonnet, happens to swing by and pick them up. Sheer luck. If Bonnet had been delayed by a single storm, those 25 men would have died screaming on a sandbar, and Charleston would never have known their names. So let's strangle one more myth in its crib. Pirate brotherhood, the bond, the honour among thieves, the articles signed in blood, the share and share alike code of the sea. It was all a marketing slogan. It was always a marketing slogan. Edward Thatch sailed 300 men into Charleston harbour and walked out of North Carolina with 40, because 400 shares of the Charleston Hall was a worse number than 40. The math was the math. The math had no friends. The crew was an asset class. He liquidated. Blackbeard sails into Bath, North Carolina, the colony's tiny capital, population maybe 100. He walks straight up to Governor Charles Eden, the king's appointed governor, and accepts the king's pardon for piracy. Then Eden takes a cut, because Eden is on the payroll. So is his customs officer, a man named Tobias Knight, who in a few months will be caught hiding stolen sugar in his own barn. North Carolina is now what Charleston used to be, a fenced goods clearinghouse run by a colonial governor who is, in every meaningful sense, a partner in the syndicate. Blackbeard is retired. Officially. He's also still robbing ships. The cargo just gets sold through the governor's mansion now. Up the coast, in Charleston, Robert Johnson is finally finding his spine. He looks at the humiliation his city just suffered. He looks at the merchants screaming for protection. He looks at his own political career, currently circling the drain, and he writes a check. The check goes to a man named Colonel William Rhett. Veteran, connected, furious. Rhett fits out 2 sloops at his own expense, the Henry and the Sea Nymph, and goes hunting. He is not interested in arrests. He is not interested in pardons. He wants bodies. He finds Stede Bonnet at the mouth of the Cape Fear River. September 1718. 6-hour gun battle. The pirate sloops grind into the mud at low tide, and the muskets cook off across 100 yards of marsh until 30 men are dead and Bonnet is out of options. He surrenders. They drag him back to Charleston in chains. The gentleman pirate, the Barbados sugar planter who left his wife and 3 children to play at being a sea robber because his marriage was unhappy. Bonnet is not a hardened killer. He is a midlife crisis with a cutlass. It does not matter. He is going to swing. The 10th of December 1718, White Point, the southernmost tip of the Charleston Peninsula, where the tides come in and the salt wind never stops. Stede Bonnet steps onto a gallows, holding a bouquet of wilted flowers in his shackled hands, and wets himself in front of a crowd of 2,000. The trapdoor falls. He kicks for a while. He stops kicking. 49 of his men are hanged in batches at the same spot over the following weeks. Bodies are left in iron gibbets to rot at the harbour mouth as a warning to incoming ships. The smell carries for miles. The seabirds eat the soft parts first. By spring you can stand on the wharves and watch their bones bleach in the sun. That is the actual view from Charleston Harbour in 1719. That is the photograph nobody took. Welcome to early American justice. The smell will get into your clothes. Meanwhile, Virginia is done waiting. Governor Alexander Spotswood decides he has jurisdiction over a North Carolina pirate. He does not. He does not care. Spotswood hates Blackbeard, hates Eden for protecting him, and hates the Royal Navy for being too lazy to act. He puts together his own kill team, led by a Royal Navy lieutenant named Robert Maynard, and sends them south on his own colony's coin. The 22nd of November, 1718, Ocracoke Inlet. Maynard finds Blackbeard at anchor with a skeleton crew, hung over from a night of drinking with another corrupt trader. There is a brief, brutal, close-quarters fight. Smoke, pistol shots in the dark, cutlasses on bone, the deck slick with blood, vomit, and seawater. When it ends, Edward Thatch has 5 pistol balls in him. He has 20 separate cutlass wounds. His head is sawed off and hung from the bowsprit of Maynard's sloop. His body is thrown over the side. You will read in popular books that the headless body swam 3 times around the ship before sinking. It did not. He was just dead. Folklore is a coward's eulogy. The crisis is over. The Charleston hangings continue into 1719. Charles Vane gets caught running the same playbook 2 years later and walks the same gallows. Within 18 months of Blackbeard's blockade, the Republic of Pirates is finished. Nassau is cleaned out. The fleets are scattered. The trade is broken. But understand why. Listen carefully. The Empire did not kill the pirates because it was just. The Empire did not kill the pirates because the king had a moment of conscience. The Empire killed the pirates because the math finally tipped. Pirate gold had been profitable. Pirate blockades were not. Once the merchants of Charleston started losing more money to pirates than they'd ever made fencing for them, they demanded action. The Empire complied. Capitalism hung Blackbeard. Morality just held his coat. And the men who got rich off pirate gold for 20 years, the fences, the corrupt councilmen, the merchants on East Bay with silver candlesticks they could never quite explain, they were still in Charleston, drinking in the same taverns, sitting on the same governor's council, watching Bonnet's body rot at White Point, and tut-tutting about the criminal element. The wolves were dead. The vultures inherited the city. Quick check-in. 15 seconds. If you're still watching this far through the blockade, through the disease, through the marooning, through the gallows at White Point, please click the like button right now. Just tap it. Because we are about to enter the darkest part of the story.
Indeed.
The part where we go
The
back
bridge
to that
by the
medicine
wharf
chest.
secures our hold
The one
on
that
the shipping
started all
lanes.
of this. The one Blackbeard wanted more than gold. Because there is one detail about that chest, and one detail about Edward Thatch himself, that we have not told you yet. And once you know it, you will never look at a pirate movie the same way again. Hit like. Don't move. The truth is worse than you think. So let's go back to the medicine chest. Spring 1718. Blackbeard is somewhere around 40 years old. We don't know exactly. He didn't write things down. Pirates kept lousy paperwork. But here is what we do know. When Lieutenant Robert Maynard's men dragged Edward Thatch's headless corpse to the side of the sloop and rolled it overboard, the body that hit the water was already rotting from the inside. 6 months earlier, when Thatch held Charleston hostage for a chest of mercury and laudanum, his crew was not the only one dying. He was, too. The exact disease has been argued over for 300 years. Syphilis, scurvy, dysentery, the whole filthy menu. But every contemporary description of him, in his last year, paints the same picture. A man whose teeth were going, whose eyes had a yellow cast, who drank his rum cup with gunpowder because the gunpowder masked the metallic taste of advanced mercury poisoning. The medicine chest was not a victory. It was a confession. The most feared man in the Atlantic did not extort an entire American city for gold because he didn't want gold. He extorted them for medicine because he was dying, and his crew was dying. And the only thing he wanted from the richest port in British North America was 30 more days above ground. He got 6 months. And here is the part nobody on YouTube will tell you. The part the Harbour Tour leaves out. The part the Disney movies will never touch. Edward Thatch was not a legend. He was a sick man with a short clock, running a protection racket out of a leaking ship full of dying friends. The skull and crossbones flag was not a symbol of freedom. It was a sign hung outside a hospice ward that happened to float. Every pirate of the so-called Golden Age was already a corpse on a delay. The 2-year average career, the teeth falling into the rum, the noses rotting in the bilge water. The Republic of Pirates was not a republic. It was a waiting room. That is the true cost of the Wild West of the sea. Not the swords, not the cannons, not the buried gold that never existed. The cost was that every man who flew the black flag had already signed a contract with the worm, and every coin he stole he paid back in flesh. 6 months later, in some cold inlet, nobody remembered. And the medicine chest? The one a 4-year-old boy screamed for in a hold full of dying men? It is still down there, at the bottom of Beaufort Inlet, North Carolina, inside the wreck of the Queen Anne's Revenge. Archaeologists have been pulling pieces of it up since 1996. They have pulled up the syringes. They have pulled up the urethral catheters. They have pulled up the mercury pots. It was all there. Exactly what Charleston paid for. Exactly what was promised. And it did not save a single one of them. Charleston did not survive Blackbeard. Charleston outlived him. There is a difference. And 300 years later, only a few people are honest enough to know it. If you made it this far, do us one favor. Comment one word. Just one. Survived. Type it. Drop it. Let us see who actually walked the whole length of the wharf with us, and who turned back at the smell. And subscribe to Salty Graves, because next week we crack open the next Grim Reality episode. The bodies are going to keep stacking up. We'll see you in the dark.